There's a reason successful movies are successful. They follow a certain formula where there are beats that land so that the audience is emotionally involved. In this episode of Communication Queens, I'm coaching Sara Davies. Sara is a coach and the founder of Sara's Stepping Stones, helping women living with ill health and chronic illness who feel unsupported achieve confidence and a support system that they can rely on by building a life that they love. Through this session, pay attention to how Sara's story emotionally impacts you the first time versus the second time when she really shares the real deal behind the scenes of what really went on. You will notice how pacing and slowing down to savor those moments, or in screenwriting, those beats of your story, actually support the story in landing and support you in the healing journey that comes when you just share your story for yourself and allow yourself to take up the space and slow down so that your story can be savored by your audience. And as she goes through the session, getting more visible and more vulnerable, you will be able to feel that heart just by how you change the way you share your story. And now, let's go to the episode.
Welcome to the Communication Queens podcast for the visionary leaders, speakers, service providers, and podcasters who are looking to stand out sharing their story. I'm your host, Kimberly Spencer, former screenwriter turned master communications coach. On this podcast, I'll be coaching you on how to share your own transformation story so that you increase your visibility, influence, and income on podcast interviews. Let's get your voice heard. Sara, welcome to the Communication Queens podcast. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I'm Sara. I have a business called Sara Stepping Stones. I help ladies who are like myself, who are found themselves with a chronic illness. Maybe they're just diagnosed or they're awaiting a diagnosis and they've been abandoned or they're feeling abandoned in their time of need, to build the support strategy or to build a support system from within themselves so that they can be the person that they need themselves to be in that moment.
Brilliant. Your work is so needed. What got you into doing what you're doing?
So when I was diagnosed 9 years ago, I was diagnosed after I had a stroke. I had an 18-month-old baby at the time and a new husband. And my husband decided at my diagnosis day to leave us because it was too much for him. So I had to be find my inner strength to be the person that I needed for both me and our son to make the changes that I needed.
Holy shit. Like,
yeah.
So I already warned you we're going to do a little bit of coaching around your story on this. And like that buildup is like a bomb went off. And the way that you speak your story has power in how it's received. So I'll give you an example. My husband was previously married years before he met me. And he had his ex-wife cheat on him, leave him for his ex-best friend, lost his ex-wife's family, lost his best friend's family, lost his mom, had a back surgery, lost his grandfather, like had to move out to LA where he knew 3 people. But in the midst of that scenario, he shares how he was literally on the brink of suicide, like had the gun to his temple and a little voice just whispered no. And I say this to you because I've seen him deliver it live in front of crowds for a decade. We've been together for 11 years. And he too, very similarly, because it was in the past, because he, like you, has done the internal work and the processing and the healing, it was just a piece of what happened. And the moments didn't land as powerfully as they could. So I want you to think of that experience, if you don't mind going there again, And say it to me as if it was a movie. The buildup, the tension, the moments to where, oh my God, you're in the hospital with an 18-month-old baby, having just had a stroke, and your husband decides to leave. And let it land, like plant it. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I guess, like you say, in my head, because I've distanced myself and I've done the healing and it's not something that bothers me anymore, I have learned to maybe take the edges off the story so that it doesn't, so it's more of a round pebble into a round hole rather than a triangle or a square peg into a square hole, where it might be a bit more edgy and it might feel like I'm still feeling hurt when I'm not.
And the problem is that in that space, because we don't want to like relive trauma on a podcast. That's not the place. And when you've smoothed that pebble, so it's no longer painful for you, if you deliver it in such a way that the audience doesn't really get to grasp the emotional weight of what you went through, to have a clear picture of like, oh my gosh, this is what happened, then that it's those emotional moments that the audience remembers. So it doesn't mean it's your emotion, your unprocessed emotions, but it's allowing the audience to go on the journey, just like when you watch a movie. It's building that anticipation, the awareness, painting the 5-dimensional picture of what did it feel like when you're in the bed? Like, what was that moment? Remembering of just whether it was in the hospital or right after giving birth, that moment, paint that 5-dimensional picture of the things that you were noticing or smelling or you heard. And those little, in acting and in screenwriting, they call them beats of the script. So there are those moments that just like land, like when Jack says to Rose, "I'll never let go," and it's like it's you remember that, you hold on to that.
Yeah.
So it's those beats of moments that create that build to that holy crap moment. So would you mind sharing it again and allowing us to go on the journey?
Sure. So it wasn't straight away, I should probably add out, but so we've returned to the hospital from my diagnosis. It's me, our baby, my husband, and the doctor turns to me and says, "You have this underlying chronic health condition and it's devastating. It's a blood condition, so it affects my entire life." And I turned to my husband to look for support, and he turned and looked at me and he just shook his head. And I didn't understand in that moment. And when we went outside, he said, "I can't do this." And he left us.
Do you feel the difference in that story?
I did.
That moment? I mean, it's a painful moment because it's your life.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that does make a big difference. And I guess, like I said before, it's that still feels raw, whereas the way I said it originally feels more smooth and like it's safer to say, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But they're both true.
And they're both true.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's in the acknowledgement of the emotions of the experience that we also get to create our own healing.
Yeah.
Of being like, wow, that really sucked.
But it was meant to be. We have built ourselves a fabulous life. I have a fabulous partner who is a fabulous step parent to my child, and I have the life that I always wanted, whereas before I didn't. So this was the, that was the start to the story, but this is the end of the story, and the end of the story looks so much better.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the power of your transformational story. So paint us a picture of what got you to the space where now you were able to attract a partner who is supportive and a great stepdad. And now you were able to heal and process and live with this diagnosis and be in the space that you're at now.
So it wasn't a quick process. About 2 years after I'd gone through that, I'd moved back towards my parents so that I could have some support in looking after my child, obviously. And I saw a doctor who told me that nothing would ever get better and I was going to live my life in the position that I was in at that point. And at that point, I was probably mobile like an 80 or 90-year-old. So it wasn't great. And I went home and I cried and I just sat there and I thought, it's my choice. I can either take that or I can go and ask for a second opinion. I can make the changes within myself. I can believe that I can get better because this isn't what I want. I want to be able to chase around after my son. I want to be able to do stuff with my son. This isn't what I want. And so I went back to the hospital and got a second opinion. And they said, well, there's this drug we can try. Let's try this drug and see if it helps. And it wasn't a miracle cure, but it did help. And it meant that I slowly got my ability to move properly back. And then I was able to crawl around and chase around on the floor with my child. And it took a while. And then I started to process all my emotions and all my feelings that were caught up with everything else that had happened. And I decided there and then that I was never going to let another man back in my life ever again because I was a terrible picker of men. And we were quite happy like that, plodding along. And then the pandemic hit. And during the pandemic, I had quite a big flare up of my condition and I ended up in hospital. And I was lying there in the bed and I was my thing when I get poorly is I always make everyone around me laugh. And the nurse came into me and he said, I really hope you don't mind or think I'm overstepping, but you should be out there because there's someone for you out there. You shouldn't be hiding yourself away. You should be like putting yourself out there. You should be trying to find this person who can make everything just like come together for you. And I left the hospital. I thought, actually, he's right. So I started putting myself out there and I met my partner serendipitously.
That's beautiful. And I love your stories so much because it's these moments of lows and then just this ability to be so courageous. And in hearing you tell your story, all I would say is just slow down. Like allow yourself to take the time to take up this space. It's your podcast interview. Like us hosts, we're interviewing you. We want to know you. We're like, come on, give us the juice. So allow yourself to just breathe and take up the space.
Cool. I do tend to like rush between, oh, this happened, but then this happened, and then I was okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Why is that?
I think because you train yourself when you're an ill person to keep some of the worst bits to yourself because you get used to people not necessarily not wanting to know, but sort of you get used to the looks of people like, oh, she's ill again. Oh, it's another thing. So you just get used to not hiding that part, but rounding that part of yourself off so that you don't always come across as this person who like these things happen to. Oh my gosh, what a drama queen. You know, there was a real time there for a while where my life literally looked like EastEnders or Coronation Street, which are two big soaps in the UK, I should probably put it out. You know, where literally every day of the week I could quite happily have been on one of those soaps of the dun 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 moment. And I guess you just sort of get used to making those bits like a little bit less obvious because people roll their eyes or look at you a bit like,
I love the fact that you said that and brought awareness to that. Because imagine in the head of your ideal customer who is struggling with real pain and whose life does feel like a very dramatic soap opera with suddenly they're in hospital again, and trying to make everybody else around them feel okay, that they're, even though that they're not okay, but trying to make them feel okay. And yet here Sara comes along and she just takes up space. And she owns that it happened and shares the stepping stone of what she learned from that experience.
yeah.
In a way, by sharing your story without glossing over and rounding off and smoothing off all the edges, you're giving permission for your ideal clients who are listening to your story, who are struggling with chronic illness, who are in hospital and out of hospital and in hospital and out of hospital, from feeling like they too have to round off the bits of the quote unquote drama of the story in order to make everybody else feel better.
And it is something that you have to learn to get used to, I think. Like when I was first diagnosed, my cousin was getting married and I was seriously unwell. And so I replied saying I wouldn't be able to go because I wouldn't be able to make like the whole day. It would be too much for me. And she sent me a very terse message back telling me that I needed to suck it up and get over my drama and that it was her wedding day and it should be about her and not about me. And I replied saying, well, that's why I'm not coming, because then it's gonna all be about you, because all eyes will be on you, because I won't be there for you to worry about. And yeah, it devolved into a whole family drama, that one.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess, yeah, it's something that is very real for people. And you can lose a lot of friends because people only, not friends, people that you thought were friends, because they want that one-way street rather than the two-way communication. And they can't back off enough to let you have the time when you need to take time for yourself and rest, and where you're not able to go out and where you're not able to do things, where you have to cancel plans. You find who your true friends are during that period, and for some people that they can find that they actually don't have any, and that can be really, really difficult and really tricky to navigate as well.
And with what you're creating, how do your products and services support that for people who are struggling?
So I offer emotional support in putting the steps in place to build that group, but to build the support around themselves. But in the meantime, I have a group of women who have been through that situation and lived that situation, who are always ready to reach out. And part of the group, part of the program is that you come in and you become part of this group and you share or you don't share, and people will just show you what it looks like to have a group of supportive and who don't expect anything in return. They're just there to offer a hand when you need one.
And so by sharing and allowing yourself to share and giving those transparent stories and allowing yourself to take up space and to highlight and not gloss over the experiences that you've had, you're literally pioneering the way for women to come into the community, because that's what you had to create for yourself, of true friends around you, and you're providing them with that opportunity. How does that feel?
It feels the way that I want it to be. That's what you said is exactly what my goal is, what my aim is, what I want it to feel like what I want people to feel when they come in. Uh, I think in my heart, what you've just put into words exactly what I wanted, what I want, and what I want it to be. And I up until now not been as eloquent as you and putting it into words.
I just repeated back your word. Like that's what you created. Yeah, that's
More
what
through
you
it when you say it.
It's the projector in me. So the power, though, is as you're sharing the stories, like the one that you expressed of your family situation at the wedding, and relaying and allowing yourself to believe your own stories, if that makes sense, because so many people around people with chronic illness don't believe them. Sometimes their doctors don't even believe them. So in a way, by honoring, and there's a principle in manifestation about reverence and giving reverence and honoring the journey that you've been on, not smoothing it over and making it really pretty for everybody to feel comfortable, but honoring the cracks and the edges and the dirtiness and the rawness of it allows in your client's mind for them to start honoring the rocks and the edges and the dirtiness and the yuckness of that gem that is a diamond, because you're going to show them how to do this nice cuts and make it a beautiful gem like what you've done with Sara's stepping stones. So walk us.
Sorry, no, God, sorry.
Please go ahead.
No, I was going to say, you're right. It took me 12 years to get a full-blown stroke to get a diagnosis. For the 12 years before that, they were telling me I was stressed and depressed all the time. There was nothing wrong with me. I was just stressed or depressed for 12 years. And I was neither. Well, I was very stressed, clearly, but I was neither stressed nor depressed. That wasn't the problem. What the problem was that I had this autoimmune disease that they weren't testing before and they hadn't tested me for. And if they had tested me for it, it could have changed everything much sooner, and my life would look very much different than it does today. And that wouldn't necessarily be a good thing, but it's something that you have to learn to live with, and you have to get over, you have to grieve. So part of the process is grieving the life that you know you should have had and you could have had, but you haven't, because you've spent all this time fighting for a diagnosis that you always knew you needed, but nobody would listen to you for.
And what are the other stepping stones?
So once we get past, so we start with grief, and then we work through forgiveness, because you have to, once you've grieved, you've got to forgive. You've got to forgive yourself. You've got to forgive those doctors. You've got to forgive your family members. And that's quite a big step, because forgiveness isn't about the other people. It's about yourself. And you can't start to heal properly from the inside until you can forgive yourself. So
can you give an example of that?
So for me personally, I had to learn to forgive my ex-husband. And I realised that it wasn't about me condoning his actions and saying that what he did was right, but it was about understanding that in that moment, he felt that that was the best step for him, that that was the best way that he felt he could serve the two of us, was that he couldn't do it. He didn't feel strong enough to do it, so he walked away. And that gave me the strength to do what I needed to do next. And so I had to learn, and it took a long time. It took a lot of practice to forgive him for doing that to us. But in learning to do that, I let go of so much weight that I'd been carrying without realising. And that again just upped my trajectory, and things just got a lot easier, a lot faster once I'd learnt. And it is a skill, and it's not something that you get right first time, and you have to keep going and you have to keep trying. But it does get easier as you practice it, as you just think about there's always something positive that you can focus on about the person or the situation. So for me, I was like, it doesn't matter what he did, he gave me my son, and actually I wouldn't be here without him. So all the rubbishness, there's this one shining, beautiful, bright light. And it might be, if it was my cousin, I wouldn't be able to say that about them, but I would be able to say I've got happy childhood memories of playing together. So focus on those rather than the things that went wrong later on.
Beautiful. And again, just slow down a bit. Especially
Fast talker.
You're a fast talker, and just take a beautiful deep breath, especially like when you talk about your son, because you light up. Like, I would love to see if you could savor like the juicy feeling coursing through your mama's veins, as far as like what that feels like to have such a beautiful shining light in your life, and then transmute that love through to all of us.
Well, I can tell you that it's, again, another quite hilarious, it's another quite interesting story. So Lucas, my little boy, was born 3 months early, weighing 2 tiny pounds. In 2012, he had his bowels didn't work, so he couldn't eat any milk. So he was still on like 1 ml of milk when he was like an hour, when he was a month old. He was a tiny little dot still, and we were very scared that we'd never get to bring him home. But every time the cards were down and they were like, this could be it, he'd rally. Like, we'd have a little cuddle and his heart rate would rally and everything would be okay for that little while we were cuddling. Then he'd go back into his incubator and he'd just fight a little bit more. So I've always been a really firm believer that actually it's our bond, the bond between me and him, that kept him going when he was poorly. And then it was that bond between him and me that kept me going when I was really poorly. And even today, he's 11 now, but if I'm poorly or anytime, he'll still come and give me a massive cuddle. Even when he's waiting for the bus in the morning and all his mates around him, he'll still give me a massive cuddle. And I think it's that's the bit that, like, I know that I've done a solid job as a mum because of that bit.
Good job. Like, not only as a mom, like, because, oh my gosh, phenomenal. And in how you slowed down and you just reveled in the love that you have for your son. And I'm feeling it. I'm in awe. I'm in just awe of you. And I have a joke with my coaching clients over at Crown Yourself that, like, I feel like I should just have, like, I make people cry on my business card. Because the tears, the emotion, the laughter, that's what retains memory. And you just sharing that story, oh my God, like, I'm honored. And I'm sure, like, our audience is also feeling all the feels, especially if you're a mom or a parent and you just know the power of that unconditional love and that fighting power of doing, like, you would do anything for your child. And you brought that in how you shared your story and how you slowed down and how you just allowed yourself to revel. And the beautiful piece is it is an easier story to tell than harsh moments, because you do love your son so much. And it's that power, though. And if you can get the audience to feel, you can A, get them to heal, and B, you can also get, you retain their memory. Emotion has far greater memory. Our brain naturally attaches more influence, and it's called the rate of RWID, rate of weight and influence. I think I'm not getting the actual words right because I'm still feeling all the feels. But there is the more emotional weight and in rate of relative intensity and duration. So the duration of the emotion and the intensity of the emotion creates deeper neural pathways in our brain. And so when we have that emotional experience with someone that we're listening to, we will remember it far more deeply than just giving the tips and tricks and bits of, we go from grief and then we move to forgiveness and then we move to XYZ next steps. It's like that story of how you went from the forgiveness of your ex-husband into the emotional depth of the love that you have and how much of a survivor. Like, I didn't know your son was in the NICU until you said, well, suddenly it's like, oh my gosh, you had a NICU baby, lived, then chronic diagnosis, then ex-husband leaves. Like, it makes an even greater build to the story of just how incredibly strong you are and what your story is as a testimony to your resiliency.
Yeah. I don't normally link, but I obviously link them together in my own head, but I often don't link them together like that in my story. Not because I don't want to, but because I think, again, you've just been through this massive, and it was a massive trauma, 18 months prior. You've survived that trauma by hook and by crook, and then bang, you wake up on the floor, you've had a stroke, and the next drama unfolds in your life. It was some of the more traumatic 18 months of my life, I would possibly say.
Yeah.
Not to be repeated, those 18 months.
Amen. And those lessons you embody, and you're now leveraging those to serve others, to support others, to give other people the strength to carry on, just like your son gave you that strength. And now you're paying it forward.
Yeah, it's really important to me to be able to help people that find themselves in that or in a similar spot, because, what I needed at that time was someone who was a bit further down the line to reach a hand back and just say, but this is the way. Follow your things. Believe you've got this. All those positive things that you need to say need to hear in times of crisis, and just, yes, okay, it is going a bit wrong now, but it's okay. It's going to go a little bit right. Remember what it was like with Lucas? Things would go down and then things would come back up again. That's what it's like when you have chronic illness and you get in a diagnosis and you're trying to get yourself better. Things can feel like they're going plateauing and you're not getting anywhere, but the rise is coming just around the corner. You just got to keep doing it. It's coming. It's coming. It's coming.
Mm-hmm. And having that support system around you. And so being sure in the interviews, especially, because I want to shift gears, because one of the things that I teach with my clients in our agency is the power of metaphors. And your client testimonials, your case studies are metaphors. Now, metaphors in neurolinguistic programming, which is what I coach in and am certified in and have been working with on clients for years, metaphors bypass the cognitive dissonance faculty in our brain where we're like, this would work for me, or because we're always thinking like, how does this apply to me? How does this work? Like, what's in this for me? How is this going to work for me? And if we can bypass that question, we can bypass that question with metaphors, because metaphors provide social proof. So being able to share your story and then have 1 or 2 or 3 client or case study testimonials of women or men that you've worked with that have had a similar experience that you can highlight, oh, when my client was experiencing the stepping stone of grief, this was the journey. So can you share one of those? Obviously keeping all personally identifiable information private.
One of the ladies that I worked with right at the beginning of my journey as a coach, she found forgiveness particularly difficult. Her parents had not come along on her journey with her. It took her about 20 years to get a diagnosis, and they had left her maybe 2 or 3 years into her journey because they believed the doctors that there was nothing wrong with her, that she was imagining it all, there was a figment of her imagination. And we were trying to work through forgiving them because it was a big step. She wanted to be able to go and see them again, and she hoped to welcome them back into her life now that she had a diagnosis. But she couldn't get past the fact that they hadn't been able to trust her and believe her that there was something wrong in the beginning. So we had to go really far and pick what it was. And it turned out that it wasn't this, that they'd left her. It was the fact that they didn't believe her, that they thought that she was just making it up and that she'd, been out of work for all this time and she was just lazy. And she had a really difficult time in letting that go. So we had to we practiced what it would look like if she found out that one of her parents was infirm, one of those, they couldn't work. How would she, what language would she use to them to discuss with them what was wrong with them and what was going on with them? And essentially we worked on programming it so that she was having the conversation that she wanted them to have with her, but in reverse, so that she could, when she then saw them, keep her calm and not go over and say, ha ha ha, I've got a diagnosis now, you were wrong, I was right. But instead go in a mature way and be like, okay, I understand why you did what you did and I've forgiven it, but I now have a diagnosis and I need your help because I find myself in this really difficult situation and I would really appreciate your help and support. And it took us a while, but we got there in the end. And the father was still not supportive, but the mother did support. So she felt a lot better having her mum on board in the end.
Amazing. And that just shows such a powerful journey, and that there's still, healing and forgiveness to be done, and that work is ongoing. But that's such a beautiful metaphor. Do you have, for another one of your stepping stones, so you have grief and then forgiveness, and then what's the third?
So once we've done grief and we've done forgiveness, then we have to do letting go. And letting go is it's like anger. So you're letting go of any feelings of anger that you have. And that's quite a common one to get stuck on because anger's quite a big one when you've spent all this time. And it's not about you've done your forgiveness. So you've forgiven yourself, you've forgiven anyone around you, but you still have this sort of really quite tight, repressed anger deep inside you that you feel that things could have been different if you'd got a diagnosis sooner or if somebody had listened to you. There's a lot of ifs. So it's about removing those ifs. So I'll talk about it from my point of view because that's the easiest one for me. If I'd have got a diagnosis earlier, Lucas wouldn't have been born prematurely. Okay. So what would have that done to my life? Would it have made my life better? Probably not, because would he have been the fighter that I needed him to be when I was pulling myself? No. Would it have meant that he didn't go through that pain? Yes. Would I take that pain away if I could? 120% every single time. But that if doesn't do anything for that if and that anger doesn't help me in any way. And so if I just keep talking to myself about that and the fact that actually he's exactly who I need him to be for what I need. And yes, I do wish I could take his pain, the pain that he suffered away, but he doesn't remember that. So in actual fact, the only person who's feeling any pain from that is me. So if I let that pain go, then again, I feel lighter. I can float. I can do more of the things that I want to do because I've got more space to be me.
Landed. Way to take the coaching of slowing down and allowing for some pacing. That was beautiful. Not only the tip, yes, and but going through all the ifs, because just whether you've had a chronic diagnosis or not, every mother has those ifs. Every person has those if I'd only, stayed with him, if I'd only left sooner, all of the ifs that can plague us. And you having such a powerful if and walking us through that journey of your thought process and the emotions that came up and then guiding us to that end point. You just took us on a journey, Sarah. I'm like, I love it. I love it. So then from the ifs, from the letting go of the ifs, what's the next step?
The next step is then confidence, because now you've dealt with your grief, you've dealt with your forgiveness, you've dealt with your letting go of your ifs. Now you need to start trusting yourself, because a lot of the ifs come from, what if I had actually believed myself? Because I didn't believe myself either. And so now we have to work on increasing our confidence and trusting our inner voice again, and that actually when it's telling us something is going on, we believe it and that we listen to it because it has our best interest at heart. But we're only listening to it when it's the positive, warm voice, and when it's that niggly little, oh, you're looking a bit rough today. Oh, have you seen how red my cheeks are? Oh, I shouldn't really be on camera looking like that. When it's that voice that we're a bit more like, well, hey, yeah, okay, maybe I don't look my best self today, but I'm showing up for myself, and that's all that matters.
Can you give a celebratory client story? Just embed that metaphor of what that means of seeing a client go through all of those steps and coming out to the point where they now trust themselves.
So there was, again, a lady that I worked with, and she'd been through quite a long process of diagnosis, and within the process of diagnosis of the condition that she had, she'd also lost her hair to alopecia. And she didn't trust herself at all because she, now she was having to deal with the visual effects of the fact that she'd got this condition, and it was only because of the alopecia that they found the other condition. And so we sat and we worked, and she wouldn't come on screen at all when we were coaching stuff. She found, this beautiful picture of her when she was younger. She had no confidence, and she would speak, but it'd be short, like one or two words. So we started with, okay, what does confidence look like to you? And we worked on what essentially the picture that she presented of herself is when she felt most confident. So we started with how would that version of herself feel? How, when she was confident? And we worked on unpicking all those things. So, she looked good, so she felt good. So, right, okay, so what's the first thing we can do? We can try some wigs. So she went and she got some wigs. She went to a hairdresser, she got some wigs sorted. And she came back a couple of weeks later. It took a good couple of weeks, but she's like on the other end, still this picture of her, but she's got this wig on, and she's talking in 2 sentences now, and I'm like, so we're getting there slowly but surely. 3 or 4 weeks later, the camera comes on, and there she is in this beautiful wig, and she's got a full face of makeup, and she's smiling, and I'm like, right, so we've cracked the physical confidence. Now we need to work on the underlying confidence. And I got her to spend a lot of time talking to herself in the mirror about what she thought about herself, what all her positive points were. And when she heard a negative thing, to just turn around to it and physically say to it, "You're not welcome here today. I understand what you're trying to do and how you're trying to help, but you're not welcome today. Please leave me alone." And she felt silly doing it at first, but she found that it helped. And yeah, by the time we finished coaching, she was chatty as anything. It was beautiful. So beautiful.
Amazing. I love that, Sara. Like the journey of just each of those precious moments of the experience of the slow and unlocking, and to the point that, chatty is everything at the end. So I always love
She's
to
one
ask.
of the,
Oh, go ahead.
no, go for it. She's one of the most vocal people in the group. She's the one who will reach out the most to, especially to new people who come into the group. She's taken it, like she's paying it forward now as well, which is really lovely.
Oh, and look at the ripple of good that you're doing in the world.
And that's the most important thing.
Mm-hmm. And it all started from sharing your story and being open, and then the transformation that came from it. I have loved our conversation today, and I want to ask, what did you love about our conversation?
You made me, I know that I talk fast, and you made me really sit back and realize that in slowing down, actually, and my story becomes more powerful in slowing down, and I don't need to rush through it, and that I shouldn't worry about people being offended by the sharp edges of my story, because the people who need my help need the sharp edges. People who don't need my help, it doesn't matter if they're offended.
Your work is so beautiful, and your story is going to save lives. I know this. So it has been my honor to have you on, and for you to be open and guided through this process. And I'm so glad that we are just, I can't wait to see you get booked on more podcast interviews to share your story in the way that you are sharing it now. And with that, my fellow communication queens, just know that your story has the power to save one life or more. So be sure you stand out and be heard. Thank you so much for listening. If you love this episode, subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with your friends. For more tips on guest podcasting, storytelling, and communication strategies, follow us on social media at Communication Queens Agency and visit us at communicationqueens.com. I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. And in the meantime, remember, your story has the power to save one life. Let your story and your voice be heard.